Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to encourage you, like my dad, the minister, we have some seats on the front. Let's just move on down here. No one ever moved, but he always said it. But we do have a few seats, so thank you so much for coming. This is an exciting day and moment in this process to get to talk to everyone and show you the work that has happened over the last, honestly, 18 months. Lots and lots of people on the campus been involved at various points in this. So we're going to begin today with, okay, y'all, there are seats down here. And I know they're getting more chairs. We're going to begin. I want to give a little overview of the process that we went through, and then I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues, our amazing team of architects who we've been sharing a lot of time with in the last 18 months. Jason, I feel like I'm a quasi-architect now. I'm trying to talk like Jason. If you ever hear him talk, he just sounds so smart and eloquent. I know he is smart, but I love the way architects speak, and this group has been the same way. Conceptualizing, when you go through a process like this of updating the master plan, that sounds kind of boring. But what you're really doing when you're looking at the whole physicality of this place is imagining our future. And buildings are just buildings that are driven by the answer to the question, who do we want to be? Who are we trying to be? And I think a great plan for a new or a continuing development of our physical presence is very closely tied to the strategic vision for the campus, which we've all been working on as well. So let me just walk you through. As you know, we have a new strategic vision. It's about a year old now. And the master plan was really driven by, we identified 5 goals. The architects looked through our vision. These 5 goals sort of drove our consideration. We're putting a lot of emphasis on what is the volunteer experience. That's sort of the student experience part. We aspire to conduct more and more research that makes life and lives better. A lot of emphasis on translational, interdisciplinary work. Ensuring a culture where vol is a verb, where we care about one another. It's welcoming, respectful of everyone, no matter where they came from, what their background is. We want to be nimble and adaptable, and that's, I continue to say, our toughest challenge. All the other 4 are a lot easier. Embodying the modern R1 land grant. Now, you've seen all those before. So this is what the process included. This is a summary of what it included. According to the university, we're required to do this every 10 years. I think we need to be thinking about it more frequently than that. To be honest with you, 10 years is so far out in the future in this world. So our last master plan was completed on 2021. So this is the first time I, as chancellor, I'm in my 4th year, but this is the first time that I have been involved in this process and really dug deep into the weeds of our master plan, what we said 10 years ago and now what we're saying now. So the work began in the fall of 2021. You can see here some of what we did. We had 6 cross-disciplinary design sessions. Our architects will tell you more about those. We had over 30 listening sessions with different groups. What are you doing? What do you want to do? What do you need? What are the barriers now? What are the opportunities, the limitations? We had 6 open forums that were conducted where there were a lot of sessions where people are looking at big diagrams and moving pieces of a puzzle around and saying, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? We had over 4,000 people respond to a survey also. So the process has been really focused on trying to reach out as much as we could. And then we had themed focused groups. So if you take a look at this, it doesn't necessarily look like, the structure of the university. If you look there, instructional space, research space, library, academic support, just looking down that list, open space and landscape, real estate, strategic plan, sustainability. That's a big important, you'll see an emphasis on that going through this. Faculty, parking and transit. Parking is something, I'm going to say this, we're going to have to, we're not done with the parking issue. And there's more work to be done on that. So these were the key principles that guided this. And I loved the way our consultants helped us start here with with principles that we believe in that are going to guide this process. And so they were connectivity. That's important to us. Being able to connect with one another as colleagues, for our students to connect with one another. Our students connect their dorms to where they take classes. A lot of conversation about a day campus and a night campus. Is that really what we want? All our dorms are on one side and all our livings and our instructions on another side. Sustainability and natural systems, you're going to hear that address and how we are addressing it, how we want to address it in the future. The volunteer experience, interdisciplinary collaboration, and growth. Planning for growth. And the growth is driven by, I'm just going to say it again and again, the belief that I have, the president has, the board, the people who fund us, that access to education is what we're about. And so more kids being able to come to college here is more opportunities for kids to get a college degree. And I say kids, anyone. Some of our students in the future are going to be not young people. They're going to be in a different stage of life. So there we are. That's what we look like now. And that's what we began. So I've talked more and thought more about roads and crossways and pathways and zones and a lot of different terms that we've used. And it's been an exciting process, and I'm really excited for our consultants to now come talk to you about the product where we are with this. So thank you so much.
Use.
It's all right.
All right, I've got this one. Yeah. Okay. I love making people planners and architects by the end of our process. And thank you all for coming out. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'm not used to this. I'm Jessica Leonard. I'm an architect and planner with Air St. Gross. We are headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland, and we're really honored to have been able to partner with the university. We do more than 80% of our work is for colleges and universities, so we work all over the country doing all different types of design, and my personal passion is R1 land grants institutions, so this is super exciting. We have a comprehensive team that we partnered with that are all local to Knoxville in Tennessee. MHM is here, CDM Smith for transportation, Newcomb and Boyd for infrastructure, and Palacio for cost estimating. And so you get to see me today, but this was definitely a team effort and a lot of people from Air St. Gross as well. The Chancellor talked through our process. These are just some photos to really highlight what that looked like. And we really wanted this to be inclusive and comprehensive. We had our standing committees that we met with every month to 6 weeks that had representation across the institution. But we wanted to make sure there were key touch points with the overall campus. And so that looked like in the first phase, these open houses and town halls where we got input. We also did a survey. We had pinups, and we got to use the design school for some of that, where we literally did exercises where we got feedback on design solutions. One of my personal favorites is actually taking stakeholders out and walking campus and letting you see it through a kind of fresh eyes to understand, and that was a lot of our initial observations. And then just getting more feedback throughout the process. And as the Chancellor said, we really wanted to start and root of who the university is and where it's headed. And so those strategic planning goals were foundational, as well as understanding the presence across the state. And so when we did our existing conditions analysis, there were a series of physical drivers that really rose to the top that we needed to solve for. And those were about your edges and gateways. What is that first experience when you come to campus? How does this brand that is so strong really relate to the physical campus? How do we create a more accessible and safe pedestrian environment? This is a lot of topography, and that's something you notice firsthand, but I can imagine if you have challenges navigating that we need to be able to address that through the physical environment. We talked about parking. It comes up on every campus. A master plan is not going to figure out where every parking space goes, but we do want to have a solution and really think sustainably about where the future of transportation is going. Those stronger connections, both internal and external to campus, you'll see that as kind of a theme throughout. There's the physical planning needs, and then what a lot of you are probably interested in is what are those space needs? And a lot of them are probably not surprising to you. There was some things that we knew, and through our space assessment really rose to the top. Housing is a big one. There's also the need, as your student enrollment has grown, to support collaboration, study, recreation spaces. And then as a foundation to a lot of your academic programs, there is a need for STEM instructional spaces and labs, as well as more maker spaces. And then the growing expansion of the Haslam College of Business is definitely a need in the near term, as well as major research growth. You see the chart on the left talks about, we are planning at a snapshot in time today, which was fall 21, and you had a certain enrollment of in-person and online. Working with different individuals in the university to project out where you might be in 10 years, so this plan can help you plan for the future. Looking at 2030, there was about a 25% of in-person undergraduate growth and 35% in-person graduate student growth. So when we look at the projections of need, that is reflected there, as well as large research growth goals that have to have physical space to accommodate it. But I don't want you to miss, this is an important part, growth, what's needed today, but an equally important tagline of this plan is addressing the condition and quality of your existing space. We talk a lot about equity and having a consistent experience for students. Well, that requires your physical environment to really reflect that. So you can see that we did a deep dive at the same time of the plan. There was another consultant firm doing a deeper dive into the facility condition, and that allowed us to use that information. And over a quarter of your space is in this poor condition. I don't want you to freak out. You're not alone. This is across all large institutions. You've got a large physical plant. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about it and thinking about a student that might have a class in one building, another one in another, might have a very different experience. And so you'll see a lot through this plan, not only about new construction, but renovation and replacement of aging facilities so that that can get increased and so that poor gets smaller and the good gets larger is really a goal of the plan. A lot of numbers on the slide. This is an important foundation to a master plan, and we want to make sure you're aware of it. So it looks at different space categories. These are part of THEC guidelines. This is also a standard that is used across higher education to categorize space, allow you to compare to your peers. You'll see the first set of columns is that 2021. What do you need kind of today? If you look at the bottom line, you're pretty much in relative balance. And some of you might say there's no way. Well, the reality is you've got some overages in some areas and some needs in others. And so we know that maybe an overage in office space is not going to meet the need for a research lab. And so that's why we look at them in different categories. But really what we understand is as you grow, you do have a need for space. And the areas where you have a need now in some of your teaching labs and research are only going to increase in the future. As your enrollment increases, you will need more student-centered space, more recreation, more wellness spaces. Mental health and wellness, physical wellness is something that is increasingly important and something that we're seeing across the country, and UT being similar in needing space. And so in addition to the space needs, we also have housing and trying to accommodate approximately 5,000 beds in this 10-year time frame as well will be important. And so there's a lot of things we wanted to accommodate throughout this plan, and hopefully we were up to the task as we walk through it. So the Chancellor talked about those key drivers that really led our planning principles. Those are documented in more detail in a final report that'll come out this spring, but the kind of the way we've synthesized both the strategic plan goals and our planning principles is in three key strategies to accommodate and kind of showcase this plan. The first one is creating interdisciplinary hubs. And so really the idea of static instruction, static research is not really the future. That's not to say you're not going to have buildings that are focused on certain things. But thinking about the future, how you can meet multiple needs and accomplish multiple goals is really important. So this diagram really highlights this idea of really thinking about a very large campus in a series of clusters. And the buildings that are highlighted in purple are a lot of the newer proposed academic and research facilities. And so looking at the hill over here, so this is the hill, this is the UTIA, the river for context, you'll see some new buildings that replace Dabney Buehler and Jesse Harris. These are thought to be new interdisciplinary research building, one for more STEM and one for behavior and social sciences, thinking more about the human subject research that is really important, that translational part that the Chancellor talked about. Moving further west, replacement of Walters, thinking about a true instructional hub for instruction and teaching classrooms as well as instructional labs that can also really increase connectivity between the Hill and the Union, which right now you really can't navigate well. Moving further along, thinking about Melrose and the replacement of Melrose Hall and the new College of Business will allow for another cluster up on the Hill that can connect down to Arts and Humanities Hub, which will have new classroom space, right-sized, modern classroom space, as well as space for the humanities departments and future art departments and renovations for architecture. And then the Circle Park for nursing, which is under construction now, as well as communications. And then moving across to UTIA and really creating a place and a heart for that campus. Right now, there's a lot more kind of asphalt and parking and more cars driving through it than other parts of campus. So being able to create places where different groups can come together. I know I just listed certain units, but the idea is that you bring multiple departments, multiple schools and colleges together to really elevate the strategic goals of the university. With each of these, there's kind of a conceptual design. These are really conceptual at this point, but for those that have been on the UTIA campus, this is Chapman Drive. So this is the new building that's under construction now, and you're looking up, and right now this is a major, really where pedestrians are walking, but the buildings are closed off on the side. It's, really the car is the dominant, and there's really no place for safety, for having outdoor environment. And so we've talked about closing that down, except for emergency vehicles, and creating a loop road that would really create kind of the same way you have on Andy Holt Boulevard in that campus, where you can really have a sense of place, having a place and a destination that makes that part of campus have the same amount of vibrancy and destination and kind of that interdisciplinary areas for the different groups and departments on that campus to come together. Thinking about the student life clusters, and so, living and learning, those are very important, so we're not trying to think of them separately, but as we think about the story, you've got the hubs for interdisciplinary teaching and research, and then you also have hubs for student life. And we have been thinking about how to start to bring those closer together and not have kind of an east and west campus. And so you'll see some housing can start to push a little bit more towards the eastern part of campus, but you'll see continued expansion where your housing is today. Even thinking more into the Caledonia area, you've got a demand for Greek housing of chapters that want to come, and so looking at places to site those where there's other houses that will start to connect to the Sardi Village, but really thinking about your undergraduate students and having an expansive amount of housing that connects better to the academic core of campus. And part of the way that can happen is right now, a lot of the housing is up on a hill, and this is Caledonia, and you've got your tall towers right here, and really to get down where a lot of your restaurants and areas that you're navigating, it's kind of taking your life in your own hands, walking down those hills, that topography, that one bridge is so narrow. We spend a lot of time walking on your campus. And so as you think about adding housing or other programmatic units, you can take the topography as an asset and really start to think about that streetscape. And so thinking about ways to work with the topography to actually create open spaces, to create a safer environment that still allows for circulation, but really starts to create a place. This obviously involves partnerships with the city and others for those streets, but really trying to create a compelling vision so that it's really a place and not the back of campus, and it really starts to become a front door as you're coming from Cumberland, which really is one way that you enter campus. And then finally, these connections. We talk about both internal and external are critical. One, because your campus is large, and two, you're in such a great place. Knoxville is a great city and in the region, and so being able to think more about the connections to downtown, one of our big aha moments that we talked about early on is the connection from the Hill to the convention center is closer than really the Hill to UTIA or even the housing, and that really doesn't feel that way because the actual way that you walk and can navigate is not clear. And so being able to leverage some of the streets to be able to get downtown leveraging the proposed bridge to get across the river. We wanted to connect the river. And so you see along Neeland extending and having the university partner on the Greenway, as well as places where we see being able to actually access the river. And so you've got the trails along the river. You've got this north-south going all the way from Melrose, coming down through the new area around art and architecture, down along the Circle Park across the river. So more north-south. A lot of this campus is focused east-west. And so how to really think about, another big one is the area across, which we talked about, the Jesse Harris to the Hill. And then the east-west, continuing to think about what you've started. A big part of planning is finish what you started. Planning is a process. You've been doing it for a long time. These are not all new ideas. And so being able to think from the Hill, going all the way across Joe Johnson, and even being able to connect over to the research park. This is, Joe Johnson now. So it's really great on Andy Holt. You've been working on the housing, and then it kind of stops. And you start to turn into highway, and you wonder why the UTIA part of campus feels separated, and it doesn't feel like a consistent campus. And that really is an integral part of your land-grant roots, the research, the interdisciplinarity. And so today, it is a huge bridge with a lot of turn lanes, not a lot of pedestrian environment. And so when you think about as a pedestrian or a cyclist moving across, it's not something that you would want to do. And so similar to what has been done in other places of the city, narrowing those lanes, obviously that requires Neeland and others to take up maybe some more traffic, but right now that's been closed because of construction and you're managing. And so being able to truly create and extend your bike infrastructure, to be able to create a pedestrian environment that's safe, can really start to extend that all the way out to Neeland and really create that east-west connection that truly connects all the way from the Hill over to Neeland Drive. A big part of the plan, while it really is supposed to be a vision and a framework for the future, the state of Tennessee does require, and we like to think about what will happen in the near, mid, and long term. The near is a little more focused. As you get out to the long term, a lot of the buildings are more placeholders to be able to think about where you might want to build in the future so you don't mess things up in the near term. So as any planning, as we've been doing this process, projects have come up, there were some in the works. And so we start with what is kind of funded in design and construction. So these are projects that are likely to come out in this next horizon, or some of them are already in process and design. Nursing, for instance, is one of them. For each of these, you will see categories. I'm not going to read every project. You will get to see this in other formats. But there are state funds. There are public-private partnerships, some for housing, some for other uses. There are more donor funds and education in general funds, as well as athletic auxiliary funds. And so there's a lot of different funding sources. So when you see this list, you might say, how in the world? Well, again, the university is thinking about different ways and thinking strategically about state requests and other ways to afford projects. So you can see throughout each phase as well that projects are happening in each geographic area of campus, and there's a series of renovation and new construction. And some of that new construction is actually replacement of some of those aging buildings. So this is the current list. When we look at near term, there's a lot of projects in the near term because there's a lot of things we've talked about, housing being a big one. And so you see a lot up in the housing area. Recreation, parking is another one. In order to be able to do some of these projects, you need to get an increase of parking so that you can potentially build on some of the parking lots. A series of renovations in athletics, as well as some of those buildings I mentioned around Jesse Harris, the Dabney Bueller, some additional housing and projects around art and architecture today. Additionally, this list was so long we had 2 slides, some more athletic renovation projects. The midterm starts to fill in where the near term ends, and this is kind of the next set where we have a little bit more detail about some of the projects. Again, you can see existing across all of campus, a little bit more on the UTIA property, Again, a series of renovation and new construction and infill, really trying to think about the density and infilling rather than sprawling and being able to connect the campus better. You don't have a lot of land on the edges, and so being really strategic about what you do is important. And then the long term is really the thinking about that highest and best use of your sites in the future. And so not all of these, while we have whether it should be more of an academic or research site or more of a housing site, not every program is identified at this point, because really it's thinking about where you don't want to mess up now so that you have these sites available in the future. Oops. And then within all of these, there is a series of infrastructure, site, stormwater, different projects, transportation that need to be thought about. And so these are documented in other documents in more detail, but to think about a series of streetscape improvements, to think about stormwater projects, to think about open space and the natural setting around different types of typology of open space, the infrastructure that might be needed, underground that you never even see, are all embedded into the cost of projects, as well as some standalone projects that might be needed and are coordinated throughout this process. So what does that look like? This is only looking at that 10-year horizon, so it does not include those long-term projects, but this is what would be essentially required to meet those space needs if you were to grow as we projected. You can see the gold is new or replacement construction, and the bluish color is more renovation. So what are we able to achieve? About 2.9 million gross square feet of renewal. So that's about half of that large number that we saw. And so really making a dent in a lot of it. There will continue to be R&R and different renovation projects on other buildings as well. These are just more of the large projects. About 3.3 million gross square feet of non-residential space. And so that's to meet those needs for instruction, for STEM, and for research, and that overall student experience, as well as being able to strengthen the arts and humanities cluster and core in that center of campus. And then about 1 million gross square feet to meet the needs of housing, those immediate demands. There's opportunities for partnership beyond that for housing as well. Another requirement of the master plan is thinking about the campus boundary. And we've worked with the state bodies to be able to think about what is really the point of that. And really the idea is, what is the highest and best use of the land surrounding the campus that really meets the needs of both the university and the community? And so we've drawn a circle around the campus, about a 1.5 mile radius. And that's really about transportation, being able to move between that area, and really in the future, the university to think, are there sites in this area that would make sense, like downtown that you've already done, for partnerships or for other strategic thinking of ways to both benefit the community, the city, and the university. And so this boundary thinks about that as an area. One thing I didn't highlight as much, but was a part of the plan, in each one of those phases, there were projects at the UTSI, the Space Institute. We were able to go out, tour that campus, meet with the stakeholders, and really think about those needs. Similarly, there's an institutional boundary that we wanted to make sure was included, and that campus will continue to think about partnerships and opportunities in Tullahoma, thinking about its proximity to Huntsville and being able to really leverage the overall, the community around that area, but thinking strategically about research, thinking about their partnerships and innovation on that campus as well. So with that, the Chancellor and I will field any questions you have about the process, the recommendations as well.
Okay, so that was a really speedy look through 18 months of work, a huge campus, 10 years into the future. We accomplished a lot in this 40 minutes or so. So let's just open it up to questions. There's one right there. If you will state your name and like what department you work in, that'd be helpful.
I'm Katie Hodges-Cluck. I am both an alumna of the History Department and I work in the Humanities Center. back in 2011, when the Marco Institute was moved to make room for the new student union, we were told the humanities building was right on the horizon. And we've been told that over and over and over. And everyone's sort of wondering, I know it was up on the plan, but like, how will we know that that's actually happening and not, bumped again and bumped again over
That's
and
a
over?
very fair question. One of the things that I've learned through this process is what our process is underneath this process or what our process isn't underneath this process. And so one of the things I want to introduce to you, Alan Bolton. I saw Alan in here somewhere. Alan, right there. Alan is our new interim Senior Vice Chancellor for Business and Planning and one of the Business and Finance. And one of the things Alan has already begun to help us with is laying out the process for how we get from, you saw arts and humanities, you saw a whole zone about it, you saw it listed here, from that to the next step of beginning getting funding, getting a plan, getting a design. And so Alan, we're going to keep working with that, share that with the campus. I think that's a piece of why it showed up and then nothing happened. And it showed up, and to be honest with you, we just didn't have a really well understood process, or maybe for, how do we pick the next thing that we actually go to the legislature for? So that's a really fair question. It is our next priority. Chemistry is the priority this year. And some form of art and humanities building, getting to work on that for the next year. And I appreciate the question, and all I can say is we're the search for funding. Those are our two priorities right now: chemistry and then art and humanities. So we're going to lay out a process and make the campus aware of it. Yes, right back there.
Chancellor, the questions, I'll just add the other thing that we wanted to make sure. And I apologize, I might have gone too fast. For THEC, we have to be down to 10 minutes. But another thing we did focus on through this process was thinking about phasing and swing space. So one of the things that is critical in order to get some of these projects is, what are the steps to get there? And so we didn't walk through all of that, but particularly in that area around arts and humanities, part of the phasing and picking the sites was the order of which it can happen and what would need to move and which projects buildings on campus can be used as swing to be able to make that happen. And so I hope that through that it also helps with some of how to get it to happen.
And that is a great addition. And one of the things I've learned in this is that has been a huge limitation for us, is having swing space. So that has to be part of the plan as well. Yeah. Okay, Larry.
Larry McKay, College of Arts and Sciences. My question is very simply is, what do you expect the response from the state and the governor will be to the master plan, especially for the more expensive buildings, the ones that exceed $100 million? Because I can see us requesting several of those a year based on this plan.
So that's a great question. We've been very fortunate here in Tennessee to get a lot of money for capital projects. That doesn't happen in a lot of states. And so in terms of the process, we have to get THEC approval, which is an arm of the state government, and board approval. Now, where we get the money, THEC makes recommendations every year to the state, and that has been the way we've built everything. And I think there's no denying that in the future we may need to be thinking about additional ways to fund buildings, as is happening with HASM right now. Half of it's being raised, the money's being raised from donors, and half of it has come from the state and the university. So this is not meant as a signal to the governor, you need to fund all these. We know how that process works, and the state has different pressures and different priorities from year to year, and we'll make our case each year the best we can. But I also think we need to start thinking about additional ways to fund academic buildings. Okay.
Hi, my name is Lars Chicos. I'm interim department head of kinesiology, recreation, and sports studies. This is super exciting. Thank you for everybody who's working on this. It's great to see our future unfold. I wonder if you could say a few words about what the plans might be for graduate housing.
Right now, we have no graduate housing. That's a great observation. When you saw that growth in graduate students, what we put up there was 35% growth. That absolutely has to factor into, and I know Frank Cuevas, our Vice Chancellor for Student Life, I saw him somewhere right there. That's a part of what that's in the planning, is we need graduate student housing. So some of those new beds you saw down the road will include that. Frank, am I saying that correctly? Yeah, so, and we're even thinking about beds we need now for undergraduates that in a few years, when we get the graduate student growth up, we can use for graduate student housing as well. That is a missing piece of our housing program right now. And it'll strengthen our graduate programs when they know we have a really great, attractive place for graduate students to live. One of the things when you see that, and I don't want to say too much here, that because I'm just brainstorming. I guess that's always dangerous to do when our friends of press are in the room. But we don't know yet what we might do on the other side of the river. I've got there's just a lot of interesting ideas that have been tossed around. And when we get down serious, do we actually own some land over there and can think about how to use that? There's a lot of exciting opportunities. I'd love to see, some nice apartments, all sorts of multi-use opportunities, some condominium, anything like that, maybe even for young faculty who might want to buy something over there. So there's a lot of opportunities. Graduate student housing is a whole right now, and we're going to fix it.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Rory Finney. I'm a PhD student in the history department. I have a couple of questions, but I'll stick to just one.
Didn't I meet you at my office hours?
Yes, you did. Anyway, so I noticed a couple of mentions of swing space, which I understand to be temporary or flexible space, office and use space. But the key word there is temporary. And as someone who's coming from a department that's being divided and displaced to make room for the new Haslam College of Business building, I want to know what priority, if any, has been given to something that's more important than temporary, which is stability. Providing departments and units with permanent academic homes that make possible the things like connectivity that you talked about earlier.
I'm going to let our architect start, and then I'll add to it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so as planners and architects and designers, our goal is a move once, no more than twice. We know that moves are disruptive, and the goal would be that you can have you build the new building so it creates the dominoes to move. That's the ideal. And in some cases, we've gotten to the point where once we get a couple projects, that will be the case. It's not always possible to do that right out of the gate. And so in some cases, there is a temporary move that can last 1 to 2 to 3 years while a building is constructed in order to be able to move that. So the idea, particularly knowing that there is some displacement with business, and then the next ask is a new building that would be for the humanities and more instructional space, would be that the goal is that's temporary to be able to then move into permanent connected space with appropriate amounts of collaboration, study, and spaces for students, faculty, and staff within that building. And so the goal is when you're in that temporary to make it as best as possible, but there are some moves in here that require, nursing right now is in space that is temporary in order to get that new building. And it's probably not ideal for them, but it's the means to the end. And so recognizing that there are a few steps, and as the chancellor said, there is a commitment to be able to get that permanent space, and when possible, only making the one move.
And I'll just add to that you said the goal of stability. I absolutely agree with that. What you saw was a picture of what we want this place to look like. However, getting there and maintaining that there will always be some movement, I guess I want to say. And I think one of the things that I talked with your group about that day, and I heard you all talking about, was some of what happened here was, not the lack of space, and then as a buffer while we're building projects, and also part of it was the process that through which we went about communicating, and I think we tried to work on that. So I think there are a couple of things. But that picture you saw, it's all about a stable, beautiful campus of the future. Getting there will require adaptations as we go. So it'll never be a place where there's not some flux. Is that fair to say on most campuses? But we absolutely want to be able in the future, once we get some of these other spaces renovated, to be able to offer people the opportunities sometimes to move once, and that could be a new future home. So there wouldn't be another move. And we lack that capacity right now, to be honest with you. We just lack the capacity.
Moira Bindner from Parking and Transportation. Hi, Gabe.
Okay, have you got the solution?
Many people in this room may not know that our department is an auxiliary department. So we have to pay for what we do. And we do that by parking permits, special event revenue from the transportation fee. And yes, we only get about 8% of our revenue from citations, even though you guys think it's 50. But we have not been able to increase our rates in order to create a piggy bank to pay for these.
Oh, this is lobbying for a fee increase. I see where this is going.
It is lobbying for how can we pay for it, especially because the last garage was about $24 million. One of the latest garages that we got an initial number for was $62 million for the same amount of space. How can we pay for that and to serve this campus, as more and more students that come to campus are expecting to park right at their dorm, right next to it, and don't want to walk?
Thank you for that question, because what I want to add to what this shows you is we will be, one of the most important things we need to do right now, there's a lot of them, but is engaging a consultant around parking. Exactly. So for example, I'm putting off the question about can we raise our parking, how much we charge for parking, until we have a really well thought out plan. I know Brian's interested in this, for what is the parking need? How do we minimize the need for cars on campus? And there are ways to do that. Michigan State doesn't allow freshmen or sophomores to even bring a car to campus. So there are levers we can pull. It's policy, it's fees, it's rethinking if we are encouraging much more pedestrian movement across the river and back. So I am very eager for us to lay out a plan about parking. I'm also the person who asks the nagging questions. I look at my own kids who are past college age, but they don't use cars on the weekends. They Uber everywhere. And so I want to know how the transportation experts of the future figure that into the picture. I don't think we can think about parking going forward like we have in the past. Everybody gets to bring a car. Everybody wants, and you're right. They want to park right next to their dorm. It could be that there are campuses where freshmen and sophomore park in a way periphery area. You can take a bus over there to get your car on the weekend when you need it. I mean, there are things we can. So I just want a whole plan. And Daily Beacon, don't say I'm now going to limit cars to upperclassmen. But we got to look at all that. And I appreciate that question, because you're right. To build a lot now is 3 times what it was before and no more spaces. And we don't want to clutter up this beautiful picture with parking garages everywhere. So it is something, but I feel like, and I hope I haven't hurt your feelings, I know you agree with me in part of this, we need some real narrow, specialized thinking about transportation, parking, mobility, pedestrian uses, sustainability in the future. So that is next on our list. Okay, now I start him to have a question.
Hi, Daniel Dasso.
Hi, Daniel.
With the Daily Beacon. So UT's planning to end their 10-year trend of growth in the freshman class this fall by having a smaller freshman class than was accepted in fall of 2022.
We've clipped it back a tad.
Okay.
I didn't say end it. We're
Well,
clipping
it's-
it this year.
So, but for the last 10 years, there's been growth,
Right.
and it's going to be a smaller freshman class. In these projections, are you all projecting that there will be more growth in freshman classes in the future? Or is every freshman class going to become more and more selective? How are you determining? 'Cause I think
We
a lot
hope
of-
to be back on track for growth in a year or two.
Why not have a lower acceptance rate? Because I think a lot of people wonder what pressures are on the university to keep the same acceptance rate. Why not have a lower acceptance rate for the freshman class? That seems like it would solve a lot of the space problems that are having to go into this thinking about the
So
master plan.
there's two answers to that question. One is what's happening is we are having a drastically reduced acceptance rate this year, because not only are we taking fewer, but we had so many more applications, over 48,000 to be exact, for next fall. So the philosophy, then there's a philosophical question about what is the role of the university. And growth, we can grow, we are growing, as opposed to most of the other public schools in the state. And that means, just as I said earlier, a greater opportunity for more students to get a college degree. And that's just a philosophical position of the board, the president, the chancellor. But we want to do that in a way where we can maintain the quality, and especially the quality of the student experience in every aspect. So that's kind of the answer to that question.
Can I add to that? And you can tell me if I'm wrong. But so one of the reasons I do love working with land grants is that's part of your mission, is to serve the state. And I do think that is providing education for all. And part of the role of the master plan is to show what you would need to do if you grow. And so this roadmap shows the reason you didn't this year is you need space, and that comes with different costs and different factors to consider. And so this roadmap also allows the university to make key decisions about those different points in time that can help them with kind of guardrails of, if you grow, this is what you will need, and you can work within that. And so that's also a real value of the plan, is to understand the physical space impacts of growth, to balance kind of your mission and goals with that reality.
And part of what happened here with housing is that over the history of this campus, we've built housing in like sort of clumps. So open 5 or 6 new dorms over a period of a few years, and then nothing. And so that's part of the issue. So now half of our dorms actually are 50 years old. So not only do we need more beds, we need replacement beds.
I'm Mia Romano in Modern Foreign Languages. I'm a faculty senator. We see this growth, we see the plans for buildings and attracting more students with the growth. That means having more faculty and staff. And so
Yes.
I imagine that along with this plan, there's a plan to attract and retain more faculty and staff. And I'm wondering what that includes, and does it include raising salaries?
I love the way everyone gets their issue in here. And that's fair. Yes, 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 and yes. So the academic buildings you saw on there are to address the need for growth in faculty, more classrooms, more office space, more space for faculty to meet with students. And yes, in order to keep growing, we'll have to continue to address, I want us to be, always be at market rate with where we hire people. So no matter whether it's staff or faculty, and whether it's tenure track or non-tenure track, I want us to be above our peers, and I want us to get to where our aspirants are. And that is something we're going to continue. The provost and I are committed to continuing to address. We've made a number of adjustments in the last few years, putting in minimum salaries for lecturers. That's largely a problem in one college, to be honest with you, but that's a college that uses a lot of lecturers, and we've got to get that fixed and addressed, and I think we've done several things. We need to keep doing it. We also need to keep raising the minimum wage. I'm getting off topic, and that'll get the headline in the newspaper, so I'm going to stop. But yes, we're going to keep addressing those.
Hey,
My name is Amy King, and I'm in the CAPS Outreach Center in the sub-basement of Hyper. It's fantastic. You come up, and it's like, oh, it's raining. I had no idea. But really, I just want to say this is great. I've worked here 4.5 years, and I feel like, to the First Lady that asked the question, it kind of felt like everything was sort of piecemealed together, you know. And this is great because it's like a 30,000-foot view, and it's like a plan, and we know what it is. So I just want to say thank you. This is great. Thanks for having the foresight to do it and the wherewithal to make it happen. So I'm just thankful. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for that. Thank you. And
You're a planner and
we've
already, yeah.
really benefited from just the brilliance of, you know, now I think you get it. I'm going to give a plug for Jason's organization. You see the benefit of design thinking and of, you know, when you design, I learned this, you design a building, you're really redesigning what happens in the building and who we are. And that's what I love about this. I'm just so impatient. I just want to do it tomorrow. I want it to look like this tomorrow, especially when you see those walkways.
Yeah. I was going to say, a lot of focus gets put on the buildings, but I actually think campuses around the country, that first experience, recruiting faculty and staff, retention of students, the physical environment plays a huge part of it. We do research, you know, Hopkins, obviously a very different institution, but they're competing at the highest level of Ivy League. And their campus, their sidewalks were kind of asphalt and concrete. And they invested in their outdoor space, and their applicants and retention rate doubled above the rest of the Ivies. And that's just one example. And your campus had not the best reputation for its physical campus, and in the last decade has really transformed itself. And I think that commitment to quality and consistency and really the exterior environment will really help with a lot of your goals as well.
And you know, I just want to put a plug in here too. One of the complexities of making decisions about this, the master plan, is we're trying to think today about what our needs are in the future. And one of the things we've seen change since COVID, I'm just going to put this out there, is a lot more jobs that can be done remotely, thinking differently about how we work. I think it's hard to imagine the state continuing to fund buildings where every single person has an office every single day. I just think we're going to have to, all of us, think about what does that look like? How do we want to address that also? And so I didn't say that to put any kind of panic out there. I just think it's tremendous opportunities. Society hasn't figured out either. You look at big corporate buildings and they're about a third occupied anymore. So what does that mean for higher ed? I don't know the answer to that. Folks like our consultants are helping us. There are also experts in the talent management piece of the world that need to inform us as well as we go forward and think about all these new faculty, Maria, that we need to hire. And then what's the best, most attractive way of working that will acknowledge some people's desire to do their research at home and be on campus the day they teach, and you know, all of those kind of things, and figuring out a way that acknowledges that and makes attractive spaces and places, I like that word better than spaces, for everybody, no matter how they work. So I'm excited about that, but I also have no idea what the guidance is on that as we go forward. Anything else? One more?
Hi, Chancellor. Nolan Wildfire in Career Development. What are your thoughts, general thoughts, on bicycle infrastructure?
I'm going to let the architect, that sounds like something over my pay grade.
I think there's work to be done on that connectivity, both internal to campus and how it connects to the larger trails. Topography we see a lot of campuses where there's topography that the starting point is, well, people aren't going to bike. And the reality is, it's a chicken or the egg. You're not going to bike if you don't have the infrastructure. And now with e-bikes and other things, we really see that there's a lot of potential. And so for a lot of the major streets, we've tried to recommend greater bike connectivity. You saw on the Joe Johnson Bridge, being able to have dedicated paths, sometimes a separate lane, sometimes on the road in a separate path. I think there's still going to need another layer of infrastructure planning to really get the exact routes and the right locations. Other campuses we've worked on really identifying each street and what is its, how do you define that street? What is the priority? And really thinking about how you think about bus and bike, and then all these scooters and other things, and where do you want them? And then the cars kind of go elsewhere. So I think you're not the worst I've seen, but you certainly have, I think, some opportunities. And with the way that different types of bike infrastructures happen, I think it will happen and increase more on this campus.
Listen, I want to thank everyone. I'm going to honor the time. I will stay around and answer any questions that someone might have that didn't get to answer. Let me just say, okay, what is next? Where are we going from here? So we will take this master plan to the Board of Trustees. Hopefully, we're planning on doing that at the February meeting, which takes place in Chattanooga. Then it goes to THEC for approval after that. One of the things you'll be hearing about, and this is part in answer to the question about humanities having been promised so many times, we need to get now the 2 or 3 more program designs ready, so that when we're ready to take it forward through the process, we'll be putting together, the first one of those will be a group of folks to help put together the program design for the humanities building. We have the program design, which you have to have before you go and ask for money. We have that for the chemistry building, and there will be two or three more of those after the humanities building. So look to hear about that, and we will try to keep everyone updated on our progress on many of these goals. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really just thrilled that everyone came this morning, and I hope you share the excitement and enthusiasm we have for where we're headed and what we can be. So thank you all very much for what you do every day.